licensed funeral director for 27 years and has worked in the funeral industry for over 30. As a sophomore in high school, Nathan began working at a local funeral home where he continued to work after graduating from Mid-American College of Mortuary Science for 18 years. In 2012, Nathan made a change in the direction of his funeral service career when he joined the team at Matthews International as a funeral service consultant. Currently, Nathan serves as the Assistant Regional Sales Director of the Midwest region for Matthews Aurora Funeral Solutions. He also serves as the past chairman of the Indiana Funeral Education Foundation with the Indiana Funeral Directors Association. He's been married for 23 years to his wife, Kristen, and they have 2 daughters, Sydney, a freshman at Taylor University, and Kendall, a junior in high school. In his spare time, he enjoys serving as a vocalist on the worship team at church, working in his yard, and most of all, supporting his daughters in their many activities they are involved in. All right, thank you, Nathan.
Thank you. So I don't know if it's great to be the first speaker after lunch or if it's great to be the speaker right before lunch, because before lunch everybody's hungry and they want to get to the food, and after lunch everybody's ready for a nap, right? So I'll try to keep you awake today, but I appreciate the opportunity to be here with you at the Iowa Convention. It's great to be a part of another IFDA, because we are Indiana Funeral Directors Association, so it's great. I won't mess that up, right? So today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the fastest growing segment of our business, which is, right, copper and bronze. That's right. I've had the opportunity to speak in several different states over the last few years about this topic, and wherever I go, the answer to that question is always known in the room, right? It's not something that folks here just in Iowa are facing. It's not folks that where I was a couple months ago in West Virginia that they're facing. It's across the board everywhere now, right? It's absolutely every one of our funeral homes are seeing this change in the growth of families choosing cremation instead of traditional burial, right? And so over my career, I really tried to look at this and kind of focus on this, especially in the last 13 years as I've served in a funeral service consultant role with Matthews, to really kind of help my customers look at this differently and not just think about it as just another cremation. And it's super important for us to think that way because of where it's at in our industry today. It's what people are choosing. It's actually outnumbered burial now in the United States. We're going to get into some statistics here in just a couple of minutes, but you all are actually a higher percentage here in Iowa than we are in Indiana. And so you're seeing it more. And so as I looked across our industry changing, we're actually starting, funeral homes were struggling. And we're going to hit on that again. We have to do better in this area to make sure we stay relevant for the families that we serve. And so what I've done over the last 13 years is my 18 years that I spent at one single funeral home, we often get narrow-minded, right? We know what we do at our funeral home, and I guarantee everybody sitting in this room does this very well, right? I think every firm actually serves families well in a traditional burial setting or a cremation setting. I just truly believe that all funeral homes truly do a great job. They do things a little bit differently. Maybe one does something a little better than the other, but I really truly believe that almost every funeral home in the United States really does a good job of caring for families. Yeah, we got those few, right, that give us black eyes. We got a couple of those in Indiana right now that are literally on the east side and the west side of the state, and both owners have stolen pre-need money. So we're looking at that right now from a perspective of that just gives us the black eye, right? We have to defend that sort of thing. But I think overall, we just truly do a good job of caring for our families. But as I've looked at this, I've been able to look at across 3 or 4 different states, firms that are doing this very, very well. And then I'm able to take ideas and thoughts from other firms and share them because I believe that if we do better in this, we all do better in this. So if we start to have families make different decisions, then we actually all benefit from that. And so as I have spent nearly 30 years or a little over 30 years in the industry, I, like you, have to go get continuing education. And sometimes it's just like we got to go do it, check the box, right? We have to have it done in order to renew our license. We have to have a certain number of hours. And so as I looked at that over my career, I really started to try to focus on, listen, when I go to a CE seminar, if I can just take one thing that makes me better from that seminar, then it was worth me being there. But if I just go into that seminar like, I gotta be here because it's part of what I have to do, I'd much rather be back at the funeral home. I got 5 families to serve, but I gotta be here to check a box. So my hope today is that when we finish in these couple of hours, is that you leave here and there is something that we talk about today that you're like, you know what? I want to implement that into my funeral home. I want to do that differently for those families that are choosing cremation. And you take it back and it just makes you one step better. Maybe you'll have more than one thing. There may be things that I talk about today that you'll be like, there is absolutely no way I would do that in my funeral home. And that's perfectly okay as well. And this, just so you know, I work for Matthews Aurora Funeral Solutions. I am going to provide you with a sample of a tool, a solution that we have at the end of my presentation. It's just the very last portion of my presentation. But truly, this presentation is really not a Matthews Aurora commercial, okay? I hope that everybody sitting in this room chooses to use Matthews Aurora, right? You should be. We are the best in the industry, okay? But we're not the only ones in the industry, so I understand that. But I truly think that you can take some of the things that we talk about today and you can implement them no matter who your supplier is. I think it will just elevate your level to just kind of look at it differently, okay? Any questions at all before we get started? All right, I also really love back and forth. And so if there is something in the presentation that you have a question about, please just speak up, raise your hand, however you feel comfortable doing that. Also, if there's something that I talk about that you're like, we do it this way at our firm, and we found really great success with that, and if you are willing to share that in this room, I would greatly appreciate it. Because I believe we learn peer-to-peer the best. And so when we get together in a group setting like this and we're able to share ideas, again, it just makes us all better. I understand that sometimes that can be uncomfortable. If your colleague or your competitor from your small town is sitting in the room with you, it's sometimes difficult to share those ideas and thoughts. My question to you is, would you come up and share that with me personally afterwards? Because what I've found is, I think I've given this presentation now about 16 or 17 times. And every time I give the presentation, it's slightly different. And the reason why it's slightly different is because somebody in the audience shared something with me that I felt was valuable to put in the presentation. And I always ask that when there's an idea shared with me, can I put it in my presentation before I do that? But if you're willing to share that, I would just greatly appreciate it because, again, the goal behind this is just to make us all better. Okay? All right? Okay, so the title of my presentation is just, we must think differently about cremation. I think that's just it. Like, again, we're going to look at statistics, specifically nationwide and then specific to Iowa. But here's kind of the role today. So we're going to look at those cremation statistics. I just want to talk to you about some mindset and terminology changes that I've really seen help firms when they just think a little bit differently or say things just a little bit differently, specifically when talking about those families that are choosing cremation. And at the end, I'm going to present you with a solution that Matthews Aurora came out with several years ago called I'll Remember You. It is a tool that you utilize to actually present to families and meet families in the arrangement conference to help kind of implement everything that we talk about today. And it just makes it super seamless and super easy. So I'm gonna show you that at the end, and then if you would have more questions about that, couple of my colleagues that cover this area, that are your sales reps here in Iowa, are in the back of the room. Ryan and Dale are in the back. Greg Prince is sitting right here in the front, the regional sales director for this area. Any of those guys would be able to help you start to implement this tool into your businesses if you find that it would be helpful for you. All right, so again, purpose, cremation is here to stay. So let's look at the current statistics, talk about some simple changes that we can make to hopefully improve on this segment of our businesses. Process today is I just want to have some open discussion with you. Willingness for you to think a little bit differently from the way we've done things in the past, changing some terminology and then providing you with that proven tool to help. Hopefully the payoff when you leave here is that we have some increased profitability per cremation call. So each of those families that are calling us to perform that cremation, hopefully we're able to increase that profitability. And hopefully that results in less direct cremations and less internet earned sales. So one of the things that I hear, especially from my customer base and from all over, is you're constantly getting merchandise carried into you in this segment of our business. They're going elsewhere to find what they should be getting from you. And so we're going to look at some ways to hopefully combat that. What I will tell you is you're not going to leave here today and never have another direct cremation. Okay, that's not going to happen. There's a segment of our businesses that is truly that direct disposal, right? It's that family that wants nothing but a cremation. We're not going to sway every family to make a change there. But if we can literally just take 3 or 4 of our families for a year and make them move to, not make them, but see the value in moving up to a memorial service or moving up to a traditional cremation or traditional funeral with cremation to follow, then we won, right? We made things better for ourselves. So hopefully that's the goal today. I wish that you could leave here and never have another direct cremation, but that won't happen. So let's look at some statistics. So each year, I look at 2 specific reports that come out. One is from Cana, and they give statistics throughout the United States as well as Canada and some other parts of the world as well. But each year in June, that comes out for the year prior. So the latest statistics that are out from Cana are actually the 2024 numbers. 2025 numbers have not been released yet. They'll be released in June. So at that point, obviously, I would change this slide. But this is a couple of diagrams in that report that I find that are really interesting. First of all, the diagram on the left goes back to 1996, and those are the percentages of cremation in the United States. And the interesting thing that I find about that report is that red line is a direct trajectory up, right? There is no place in that fluctuates much, except for those couple of years that we all remember a few years ago called the pandemic, right? There's a little bit of fluctuation in those couple of years because of what families were forced to do during that time period, depending on local and state regulations at that point. But when you look at that, it has been a steady increase from all the way back in 1996. And that's actually, I started in the industry 2 years prior to that. So I started in 1994 working at the funeral home. And so when I started at the funeral home I worked at, we were at about a 16% cremation rate. It was very uncommon for us to have a cremation. We had a few, but not very many. When I left the funeral home in 2012, we were at 43%. And so I'm sure you all are seeing those exact same numbers here. But I just find this report really interesting because it just gives you that look back and where we've gone as an industry. The graph on the right is just a United States map. It's color coded. Just kind of gives you an idea of where your state falls with the rest of the United States. You guys are an orange state, so you fall in between the 61 and 70% mark. So that's kind of where this last report showed Iowa. So look a little deeper into this. National averages, I looked back 20 years. So this report again is 2024 numbers. I looked 20 years back from that. We were as a nation at 30.9. 5 years later, we were at 38.1. 5 years later, 46.7. 2016 is when we crossed the 50% mark. So 2016 is when the United States leveled out burials and cremations, okay? And so then looking at 2019, which would have been 5 years prior to this report, 54.4, and then in 2024 we were at 61.8%. Iowa averages in 2019, so 5 years prior to this report, you all were already over the 50% mark at 54.4%. And then in 2024, when this report came out, you guys were listed at 64%. The projected numbers for Iowa, and what I have found over the number of years that I've been looking at this report each year, Cana is almost always spot on with their projections. They are very rarely off, but by maybe a 0.5% or a full percent. So they are very good at projecting where each state is going by looking at trends and things like that. So they're saying in 2029, you all will be at 78.1%, and then in 2034, so 10 years after this report, you all will be at 85.6%. And so those numbers are staggering, right? They're staggering. Now, what I want to share with you is this report is strictly whether the death certificate is checked burial or cremation. Okay, so there's no detail in the Cana report as to how many folks are direct cremation, celebration of life, traditional cremation. Okay, so there's none of that in this report. This is strictly that the death certificate is marked as cremation. Okay, so just kind of throw that out there. But just out of curiosity, those of you in the room, you're currently at 64% according to Cana. How many in the room are at that or above that right now? Okay, so a few. Do we have anybody that's drastically lower than that? I heard a 60. Is there anybody lower than 60 that would be willing to share? Yeah?
Yeah, we're about 40%.
Fantastic. Okay. Enjoy that. Keep it as long as you can. All right. So when I speak specifically in the Midwest, like Indiana, Illinois, Ohio, where we're just slightly over 50%, I share this because I think when you think about it this way, and you guys are slightly higher than this, so you've experienced this already. But when I say it this way, I think it hits a different way. We can talk percentages all day long, and yeah, we all know what percentages are. But here's where I think it really hits home. Over half your families that are calling your funeral homes for you to serve them during their time of need are now choosing this. When I started in the industry as a 16-year-old and started to kind of get into the business and understand that this was what I wanted to do, I would have never, ever thought that we would get to the point where every other family that was calling your firm was choosing this. And you guys are above that, right? And there are certainly several of you folks that are in this room that have been doing this a lot longer than I have. And so you even go back further than that and see what it used to be even before I started. But when you really start to think about that, when you think about every other family, it's actually a little bit greater for you, but every other family that's calling your firm is now choosing this. And the trend is true because I can prove it, because guess who else is choosing this? We are. We as funeral directors are choosing to be cremated. That, to me, that's staggering, right? I would have never have thought about that. I don't have a problem with it, but I'm surprised at that. But I specifically know people that are in the industry that have chosen cremation. Now, they still may have a service and body present, everything else, right? That's perfectly great. But we actually have those of us that do what we do that are now choosing this as their form of disposition. And so just thinking about it differently, maybe changing the way you talk to families, what we ask families in a setting, that's what we're kind of really going to look at today. Okay? Any questions at all about the statistics, the numbers themselves? Okay. In Cana's report last year, there was some good news that was in there. It said that cremation growth slows, but there's no reversal in sight. Yes?
I did have a question came to me after you started this.
Sure.
Does Cana believe that at some point that number's going to level off, or did they see it creeping to 99% at some day?
I believe they believe it will level off.
Okay.
I think there will be
5 probably about the leveling off point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think what we're going to get, this is Nathan's personal opinion, just as we have, as I've really looked at this over the years, I think we're gonna get to the point where, in most parts of the United States, it'll shift a little bit, but I think we'll get to the point where we have about 80% to 85% cremation and about 10 to 15% of families that still choose traditional burial. I don't think traditional burial families will all go away at all, but I do think it'll be the smallest segment of our business. Yep.
Kind of another question off that, does Cana in the future ever see that number coming back down?
That's what,
Right.
at this point, no, and that's what this slide is that they see it, the percentage of growth each year is actually decreasing. So it's not increasing as much each year, it's coming down, but they believe there's no reversal in sight. So in other words, I don't think that Danielle's gonna invite me to speak again here in Iowa in 10 years, and I'm gonna stand up in front of you and say, congratulations, your guys' cremation rate went back to 52%. Like, I don't think that will happen. I hope that even though they're choosing cremation, we have more families choose to do some sort of memorialization with that. And I do believe some of that is coming back. I actually think that's something out of COVID that did help us a little bit. When they were forced that they couldn't do anything, there is a segment of the population that missed the opportunity to say goodbye. Now, there's still a segment of the opportunity that doesn't want to say goodbye, but there is a segment that did miss that opportunity. Okay. Other report I look at is NFDA also puts out a cremation and burial report each year. This is from August of 2025. Again, just a graph in the top right that kind of shows you the spread, right? So if you go back to 2005, burials outweigh cremation, and you can kind of see about the 2015 mark is where they crossed, right? That's where they kind of got to that point, which goes back to that previous slide. The other thing that I think is interesting in the NFDA report, they will actually break it down for those who give them feedback and do their get their information from, so that those flyers that go out that ask you to participate, this is the numbers that they get back. So about 37.9%, so nearly 38% of those cremations were direct cremations from that report. About 38.4 were cremation with memorial service, and nearly 25% were casketed adult funerals with viewing and then cremation to follow. So that kind of gives you a little bit of a breakdown, and where kind of NFDA is seeing what families are actually choosing once they choose to be cremated, okay? So again, our hope is that we can move some of our families from this direct spot into one of these other categories, okay? That's what we do, right? So consider this regarding cremation, and these numbers actually come from Federated Fiduciary, which is an accounting firm that specializes in funeral home accounting. And so I happen to be really good friends with my Federated rep that covers the state of Indiana. So each year he kind of updates me. And then I actually asked Roger Shagrin, who was here today, if these numbers kind of gelled with what he's seen in Iowa. And I have some good news for you in that regards. So on average, the average cremation contract in a typical Midwestern funeral home is about $3,423. So when Federated looks across their customer base and they look at their cremation contracts, no matter whether it's a direct cremation or a traditional cremation, the average contract is $3,423. That does not include cash advance items, okay? This cremation contract average is almost exactly what the average overhead per call is at a typical Midwestern funeral home. So what's this tell us? A lot of funeral homes are operating on a very level playing field. So a lot of their families that they are serving, they're paying their bills, but they're not creating any profitability at all with those calls, okay? Now obviously, when we look at traditional cremation, we're creating profit there. But on average, this is what Federated is seeing on those contracts that are marked cremation. So to me, this is scary, right? As more and more people go there, if we are not creating that additional profit, that's what starts to squeeze us as funeral homes. We have to start looking at staffing. We may not buy that new funeral coach. We might have a remodeling project that we have to put off because families aren't choosing to do what they used to do, okay? Now, the good news is, when I talked to Roger, The state of Iowa is actually about $400 more than this. So congratulations, that's actually really good, especially when you figure what Federated says the average profit per call, so after your expenses are paid, is nearly $400. So that's actually really good news for you guys, that you're doing it well here. And so hopefully that you'll see a couple of things today that will make it even better. But you guys are actually doing better than what I would consider when I think about the Midwest, that Indiana, Illinois, Ohio, Kentucky area. Your guys' average contract is actually better. This is another staggering statistic that I think when you think about it this way. On average, cremation families spend about 34 cents with you for every dollar a burial family spends. Okay, so that's where the squeeze starts to happen. Okay, they're just truly spending less. Most of the time, the minute a family tells you they want to be cremated, before you even get to have a conversation with you, you're starting $3,500 behind the eight ball. If it was a traditional burial family. Okay? So that's what I kind of consider the $3,500 gap. And how can we help try to close that $3,500 gap? Okay? What we know about families that are choosing cremation. They're in an emotional, trying time, having just lost a loved one. This is actually not just cremation. This is absolutely every family that calls upon you, right? Most of the time, this is a really difficult time for them, right? Maybe they didn't like their loved one and it's not a difficult time, but most of the time it's difficult, okay? They probably never made funeral arrangements before. NFDA also shares that on average, most individuals are only involved in making funeral arrangements once or twice in their lifetime. So it is not something that they have a lot of knowledge on and really know a lot about. When I get to this point of my presentation, I always like to make sure that I point this out. So over my 18 years of serving families on a daily basis, there were families that I sat down with more than twice, right? We all have those families that we've served multiple times, and unfortunately, they have had to be a part of this a lot more than what this average is, right? But on average, most people are only involved in making at-need funeral arrangements once or twice in their lifetime. Okay, so they are not experts at it. They don't know about it. That's why they've called upon you to help them walk through that. They're extremely uninformed about the decisions required to make funeral arrangements. I really start to correlate this to thinking about what we do and what a wedding planner does. When you think about those two ceremonies, you think about a funeral service and you think about a wedding. They're actually super similar. Some might say one is a celebration, one might be mourning, some people might flip that, right? But truly, if you really look at the ceremonies themselves and the details that go into the ceremonies, they're very, very, very similar. We do it in 2 days, and a wedding planner sometimes has years to plan. Right? So they really are uninformed about the number of decisions and things that we have to do, the details that we have to put together in order to make that happen. Now I do realize that unfortunately in today's world, we're stretching out from arrangement conference to when that service is taking place. Anybody here experiencing, can we have that on Saturday afternoon at 2 o'clock? Right? Because that's when it's convenient for me, not for you. Right? So we are seeing a little bit where we have a little bit more time, especially in this cremation environment, and everybody wants it on Saturday afternoon, so then you have 4 cremation services on Saturday afternoon, and you really have a traditional burial that should be on Saturday afternoon, but you can't plan it because you're too busy, right? So that's what we're experiencing. But when you really, really think about the correlation of a wedding and a funeral, they're super close. The other thing is, weddings cost a lot more, right? So that's like a tool to think about. Correlate that with your families. Tell them how similar those services are. Tell them how quickly that you plan the exact same thing, and then correlate it to because we always get that, why is it so expensive? Man, it's so expensive to die, right? Correlate it back. I was a part of a wedding last year for a customer of mine whose daughter got married, and I actually officiated the wedding. And I'm super close to the parents of this bride. I'm not super close to the bride and groom. But they had their wedding at a venue somewhat similar to this, 5-star hotel. They spent over $100,000 on this wedding. Correlate it. Tell people that, because then it puts in perspective. We're celebrating an entire life, and it costs this much. And I hate to tell you folks, but you know how many times some people get married? And that's okay. I don't care. Right? Some people do that multiple times. You have one chance for the funeral service, right? So just correlate that back to families that push back on dollars. Share with them those statistics. Let them think about how that all works, because no one can deny how similar the ceremonies are. Hopefully one of them has a casket, right? That's the goal, right? All right. They're overwhelmed by the number of decisions that need to be made in such a short order. We just covered that. Here's the big one. I think consumers think cremation is cheaper and it's easier. Okay? We hear it all the time saying at the front door, you're just going to cremate me, right? It's a heck of a lot cheaper to be cremated. That's what so-and-so told me. And this is where I think sometimes we can change what we say, change some of the terminology. Because I believe that sometimes families sit down with us and they think we're trying to pull one over on them. That we're trying to get them to do something that maybe they don't want to do. And I think when somebody says this to you, agreeing with that consumer and showing them how is how you can start to build that relationship. So when you're standing at the front door and one of your neighbors comes in for visitation and they say, John, you're just going to cremate me. You're not getting me for it. It's a heck of a lot cheaper just to be burned. Right? You know what, John, you're actually right. A lot of our families are now choosing cremation, and it can be a lot less expensive. And here's how. Because when your family chooses to be cremated, we can actually remove the entire cemetery expenses off of your contract. And when we do that, sometimes it can save your families anywhere between $300 and $3,500. What did I not say in that conversation? I said nothing about my funeral home's charges, but I agreed with the consumer and I proved to them how I was going to do it, right? So then it just drops some of that emotion and that red flag that when they do need you, they're going to call you, right? So again, just thinking about that a little bit differently and how I can agree with the consumer, because for years, I was guilty of this. It's just another cremation. It's just another direct cremation. Well, now it's more than every other family that's calling this, right? Okay, this is the scariest one. They probably Googled cremation before they came to see you. Families know more about us now than they ever used to know about us before they sit down with you. And you know what happens when you Google cremation? You know what comes up? So typically, what you see when you Google cremation is this: the lowest cost provider in your area, or maybe not your area, and the terminology direct cremation. That's what you see when you Google cremation. That's why I believe when the consumer calls you, the family calls you, they only know what to ask, and that is, what's your charge for direct cremation? It's because they're getting their information from the internet, because that's unfortunately what our industry advertises. Like you don't drive down the road and see a billboard for a funeral home and typically see it say traditional burials start at $8,500. You typically see, if it's not just an information billboard, it's direct cremation, whatever the dollar amount is, right? That's what we typically advertise. And then we sometimes wonder why the families ask us for that. Now, I want to say that it makes no difference to me in this room, and we won't talk about this at all today, what you charge for that service. I could care less. You know from your business perspective where that number needs to be. And if you don't know where that number should be, then I would suggest that you have a good conversation with your accountant or get with somebody that can help you determine whether you're being profitable or at least meeting your expenses from that perspective. But it makes no difference to me whether you are what I consider a low-cost provider or if you're a traditional funeral home. And I think there's actually a place for both, right? There's a place for a low-cost provider in areas where there is a larger population. There is a segment of our generation right now that's what they want. That's all they want. And so I wish we didn't have low-cost providers and discounters, if that's what you want to call them, but we do, right? So we just have to figure out ways to set ourselves apart. If we are charging more than what they're charging, why? Why do we do that? What do we do differently? What are things that we give to that family service-wise that are above and beyond? And so, but it truly makes no difference to me from your perspective what you are charging. But when you think about this, this is where the consumer is getting the information. This is why they call and ask that question. What's your charge for direct cremation? That's the number one telephone solicitation family that calls us. That's what they ask us. What's your charge for direct cremation? All right, why are they choosing direct cremation? For them, it's perceived cost effectiveness, the environmental concerns of it. There's a segment of our population that feels that way. There's an increasingly transient population, right? We're not as close as family units that we ever used to be. Right? We don't live in the same communities anymore. We're not close to our grandparents, our parents, like we used to be. And so when you don't see your loved one when they're living, it's easier to not see them when they die, right? And so just again, thinking about how spread out we are as family. There's fewer religious prohibitions against the practice, right? The Catholic Church used to be anti-cremation. Now they're considerably open to that. Other religions are the exact same way, right? So there are just less folks that are affiliated with a church or a religious organization. Desire for simple, less ritualized ceremonies. So coming in and sitting in rows of chairs like we're doing right now and having a typical traditional service, that doesn't appeal to everybody anymore like it used to do, right? Cremation has become socially acceptable. It's in people's minds, it's okay now. The number of Americans who identify with no religion or don't have any religion. And then the last one is they're planning to do it themselves. They feel like they don't need you except for that disposition portion, right? Because that's what our laws say, right? So again, just thinking about why are they shifting this way? Research shows in a previous NFDA study that only 7.4% of Americans don't see a need for some sort of memorialization when they lose a loved one. So there's a really small segment of the population that feels like doing nothing is the right decision. Most people want to do something, okay? Now that something, again, might be on their own, but they see some sort of value in doing something when their loved one passes away, okay? So what I think that means is we should approach every family that calls upon us that they're planning to do something. And let's make them or have them tell us that they want nothing, okay? But if we approach it that way, because only 7.4% of Americans don't see a need in doing something, then that's where I think those conversations will help us get those families to make the decision to do something else, because I just don't think they know that they can. There's still a segment of population out there that thinks cremation is only direct. That's it. And well, obviously we know that's not the case. So could it be that families don't know their choices or are not being properly educated? Remember that you are the expert or the cremation specialist, just like you are the funeral expert and you are the funeral specialist. Don't let Google be this for you, okay? Make sure we ask the right questions, have the right conversations. Make sure that they know what they're asking for when they ask that question, okay? So I believe it begins with us changing our attitudes about this segment of our business. I can say this in a room full of funeral directors, we gotta get excited about cremation. I didn't think I'd ever stand up here and say that to you, but when it's every other family or more that are calling your funeral homes and requesting this, we have to get excited about this segment of our business. It's not probably what any of us got in this to really think about, but it's where we're at, right? So we have to get excited about it. So we must ask the right questions and provide the right answers. We need to educate families that are choosing cremation. Don't assume that they know all their options, and then we must treat the family choosing cremation just like we treat the families that are choosing burial. And when I say that last thing, I always like to make sure I tell you that I don't believe that anybody sitting in this room is treating a family that chooses cremation at your funeral home poorly. I don't think any of you are like, oh, well, I'm not worried about this, it's a cremation. But what I'm meaning with that is we do things differently on the burial side of the business than we do on the cremation side of the business. And we really need to hone in on making sure that we go down the same path, even though the final destination is different. Okay? And we'll get into that a little bit more. All right, so asking the right questions. I've developed this list of questions that I've found that I believe if in certain circumstances, not that you have to ask everyone to every family, but depending on how the conversation's going, this can help drive better conversations when a family calls you or is in front of you making cremation arrangements. So these are just some questions for you to think about, and when you're in that specific setting, you may be able to not push back with the family, but be able to ask them these questions to hopefully allow them to kind of think about going down a different path. Okay, so the first one is just asking, have you ever arranged a remembrance with cremation before? If so, can you tell me about that experience? Okay, a lot of times if they have done it, it wasn't a great experience. So this allows you the opportunity to know what their roadblocks are and how you can start to think about how you can get around those and or have meaningful conversations to show value in what you do, okay? And again, thinking back to those previous slides, most people are only involved in this once or twice in their lifetime. So a lot of the folks that you asked this question for, they're probably going to say, well, my sister's husband was cremated and that's why we think we want to do this, right? So they were technically a part of it, but it's what somebody influenced them or told them that they did previously, okay? Just asking, why did John choose cremation? Why did Dad choose cremation? Most of the time, what I found with this question is the answer that you get back is, Dad just wanted to be cremated because he thought it was cheaper and easier. He wanted to take the burden off of us. So we just want to have a really simple service in cremation. Well, FTC tells us what a direct cremation has to be, right? When they said we want to have a simple service, that's not a direct cremation, right? That falls into the next category. And so where I think we lose is when we hear the words direct cremation, we quote the price and that's all we do, right? So driving these questions, why did Dad choose cremation? Just having that open dialogue. Is your family wanting the cremation to take place before or after the service? This, to me, is the number one question that you should ask every family that's choosing cremation unless they started the conversation about the service and then cremation. And the reason why I think this is so important is because when you think about this previous slide that we showed, only 7.4% of Americans don't feel that doing something is important. Okay? So this drives home making sure that that family is aware they can do something even though mom or dad or grandma or grandpa is being cremated. I truly believe question 3 is the most important question to ask. When you say direct cremation, what does that mean to you? So don't assume that that family actually knows what direct cremation is. I think we could take 10 different families, put them in separate rooms and ask them what they think direct cremation is, and we get 8 or 9 different answers. Because I truly just don't think they really know what they're asking for, and I think it's because they Googled it before. I think they knew about what they thought they needed to ask from doing their research before they came to see you. Did everyone in the family get a chance to say goodbye? Again, thinking about the previous slide, we're more transient, we're more spread out. Not everybody can be present when mom or dad or grandma or grandpa dies. So asking this question can move into having a conversation about a traditional cremation with the body present, or it can even lead into a private family goodbye, right? Just having that family to come in, spend a little bit of time with their loved one before the cremation takes place. I still believe there's a large segment of our population that has no idea this can be done. Are you aware that you can have a visitation or viewing prior to cremation? I'm guessing that a lot of you already asked this question. And then, have you decided on a final resting place or permanent memorialization? So in other words, after the cremation has taken place, what are we going to do with mom or dad or grandma and grandpa after we're finished with that? Are you taking them home? Are you going to choose to bury them in a local cemetery? Are you going to scatter? Whatever your laws and rules are here in Iowa, right? But having that conversation helps lead you down the path to guide them to what to do next. Sharing stories at this point about how in the news, we hear reports all the time where people are finding urns left out by a dumpster, or people move out of a house in an apartment complex and there's an urn sitting on a shelf that no one has an idea of who it is unless they can trace that number back, right? Or there happens to be paperwork with it. And so having those conversations, not to scare them, and I think it's perfectly okay for a wife to take their husband home after the cremation process is over, but then like, what are we gonna do when something happens to you? Because your children may not want dad and you. So what's our plan after that? So just kind of educating and talking to them about that and why they should make a decision about that. So it helps you a couple of different ways. It helps you guide them to their decision as to what they want to do. It also helps guide as to the direction of the cremation urn that you might help lead them to. Okay? All right. Any questions about any of those questions? All right. So when we are meeting a traditional burial family, almost always, how many containers does that family choose? I've seen a couple hands, right? Feel free to speak up. Almost always, when you meet a traditional burial family, they are choosing two different containers, right? They are choosing a casket and an outer burial container, right? Sometimes, depending on where you're at, sometimes in a larger metro area, you may only get one of those. You may get 0 of those, right? But most often, those families that you meet that have chosen traditional burial, they are selecting a casket and a burial vault. And we give them a wide range of what to choose from, right? The way I did it was I took them in the room, I explained the differences in some caskets, I walked out. Okay? You may do it differently, you may do it the same, but that's how I did it, right? But we walked in and there were caskets that started at X and ended to Z, and wherever that family wanted to end up was perfectly okay, right? We didn't treat that family any different if they picked the cloth covered or they picked the bronze, right? But we gave them the choice of that. And we allowed them to select that. When we think about cremation families, they actually also always need to select 2 containers. They need to select a container that their loved one's placed into to physically go to the crematory for the cremation process, and they need to select a container that their loved one is placed in after the cremation takes place. It's exactly the same thing, but we do it differently, or I've seen that there are several folks that do it differently. We ask different questions. So again, today during our arrangement conference, we will need your family to select 2 containers. First, the casket or container that we place dad in for the cremation process, and second, a container that dad's cremains will be placed in once the cremation process is finished. Okay, you see that I underlined select. Okay, so that's that terminology thing that I feel like we can twist just a little bit. If we insert the word buy there, it throws up red flags. The family believes when you tell them they have to buy something, that you're actually telling them something that they don't have to do. But when you tell them that they need to select it, they already know there's a cost associated with what they're doing in your building today. Okay? Now you might have to fight that for the family who says we have nothing, right? But we tackle those families even on the traditional burial side, right? When a family tells you we only have X number of dollars, what do? We make it work. right? Or we do our best to make it work, right? So again, when you think of that correlation, the burial and the cremation families, it's the same way. 2 containers today. I need you to select them. I'm going to give you choices. I'm going to allow you to select them. Okay? Don't tell them that the basic cardboard box is all they need or that it's good enough. We don't tell burial families that a cloth-covered casket is all they need and that it's good enough. It is, right? A cloth-covered Kinsey casket from Matthews Aurora will serve the exact same as a 48-ounce bronze, right? It will do the exact same thing. But we don't tell burial families that a cloth covered is all they need or that's good enough. We walk them in the room, we give them our selections, we have them choose. If there's not something in our normal selections, they ask us, we go find it, right? That's what we do. But when we get to the cremation setting, especially in the direct, we include a cardboard box where we say, this is included. My suggestion to you is to think differently about that. Even though FTC tells us that we have to put it on our price list that way, that it has to be direct cremation, then direct cremation with alternative container, and then direct cremation with a container provided by the consumer, right? Immediate burial is the same way. So when we do an immediate burial, do we automatically give them a cloth covered? I don't know about you, but I'll take a 48-ounce bronze directly to the cemetery any day of the week. Or a cherry, or an oak, or a 20 gauge, right? So when we even get to that portion within a burial, and the family only wants immediate burial, we still ask them what they want from a casket perspective, right? So again, just thinking about how we do it with the burial family, and how we're currently doing it with the cremation family. If you're already doing this, that's wonderful. But we should be giving those families the exact same choices, not the same casket choices, but we should be allowing them to select it just like we do the burial families. Okay? Make sure the first container that the family select is being used. So this is here because my hope is that all of you are doing some sort of an identification prior to that cremation taking place. And if you are, tell the family that the container that they select is the container that we're going to place that in for the identification process. Okay? Sometimes I get a little pushback on this of, I can't show you out of the cardboard box, I'm sorry, I just can't do it. Okay, if that's how you feel, that's fine. After they make their selection and they choose a cardboard box, give them the option to sit down on a dressing table. But if they choose the second or third step or the fourth step, then put them in that container so when they come in, they see what they purchased. Okay? For years, we never even showed the family what their loved one was going in when it was cremation. We just said it's a cardboard box and that's all you need. Right? There's some folks that are still doing that, right? And so just think about that from that perspective. So what they choose, use, right? You can make a change in that first step if that's the direction that you feel the most comfortable. But I think sharing that with the family, that whatever container we select, that gets placed in for the cremation, when I have you come back in for the identification, that's what God will be in. So they know that they're going to see it. Okay? Explain the difference between single-use cremation caskets and ceremonial cremation caskets. Makes no difference to me which you use. I spent my 18 years using what we termed at that point as rental caskets, now a ceremonial casket. I actually would recommend to you that you offer both now. And the reason is because more people are choosing it. And some families don't like the idea that someone else was in that casket, even though we know how it's treated, right? And we explain that the whole inside comes out and the new inside goes in. But I actually would recommend now that it's 64% of your business, that you actually, even if you use a ceremonial rental casket, that you have other options available for that family to choose. A lot of times, the way I set that up is their rental or ceremonial casket is the most affordable, right? That's the starting point. A lot of people are still going to choose that, but just giving them that opportunity to choose something different if they want to. Okay? Stop asking families if they want to buy an urn or if they want to look at urns. We don't ask burial families if they want to buy a casket. We just make it a part of our arrangement conference and a part of the selection process, and we move to that step when we get there, right? I believe that when we ask a family if they want to buy an urn or if they want to look at an urn, the answer is always no. They don't want to be at your funeral home. But what you just did was plant the seed that they need one, and then what happens? Anybody got an Amazon urn delivered to them or carried into them? Because we planted the seed that this is something that you need, but we asked them if they wanted it. And again, just correlate it back to the burial families. I truly believe if we start asking every burial family if they want to buy a casket, we'll start getting more caskets from Costco and Titan. But we don't do that. We just say, now I'm going to take you in the room and I'm going to explain the differences. Here's all of our choices. Choose what you want. Right? So just think about that again. Just think about that correlation as to how we do it on the burial side and how we're doing it on the cremation side. Know your urn averages. This also just helps drive home that this is more or is less expensive than the burial route. Right? We have full-size urns that range from $42.95 down to $110. Right? Or whatever your range is at your funeral home. Right? This is a lot less expensive than a traditional burial vault or a traditional casket, right? So you're helping that family see that the decision that they made, they're achieving the goal that they achieved. Okay, but we still need to select it. Know your service price ranges. Always quote them high to low. So whenever you quote prices to a family, either on the phone or prior to taking them into the selection room, if you give them like a range of prices, always quote them high to low. This is actually an old merchandising technique that truly does work. So most of the time, especially in a setting like we are, where the families are not catching everything that we say to them during the arrangement conference, they will remember the first number that you give them. So if there's anything below that first number, that family feels like they're getting a deal. But if you reverse that and you quote it low to high, they remember the first number and everything above that's expensive. So when you walk a family into the selection room for a casket selection, always quote your prices high to low and then tell them what the mean is or what the middle is. Because most people want to be average, and that middle is average, right? And so just think about that from a perspective of all merchandising. Always quote your service prices and your merchandise prices high to low. And sometimes that's tough to get your mindset around because that's different than what we sometimes are used to, but it truly is. The consumer always remembers that first number first. That's what they remember. All right. Can somebody tell me what that is? Body bag, right? Disaster pouch. That's one of the really nice ones that when you go to the coroner's office, pull them off the table, the handles don't rip, right? That's one of the nice ones. Yeah?
Back to those last slide, I was just wondering, when would you ask families to bring in clothing and underclothing?
Yeah, so if you knew that you were sitting down with a cremation family, I would encourage you to have them bring clothing when they come in for arrangements. Obviously, sometimes we don't have that answer right then. But just think, even though sometimes that family will say, well, Dad's just going to be cremated. Do we still need to do that? Yes, because something that we do here at the funeral home is we will do a positive identification, and we would like Dad to be in the clothing that you would like to choose. And so and sometimes it's not going to work out right. So maybe you have to use a hospital gown, or you ask the family what they would prefer. That is, sometimes the pushback there, like having that identification. When do we do it? What containers do we have available for that family that they chose that it's there right now? Do we invite that family back the next morning? I think that's all about planning on your part, and that's what we do, right? So finding what works best for you and your firm and how you handle that is the best way. But I think doing things like that is what does set us apart as a traditional funeral home from what you typically see in a discounter or a low-cost provider situation, right? So that's something that you can kind of show them that you're doing differently. All right, so body bag, disaster pouch, right? We utilize this to safely transport someone's loved one into our care, right? That's what we typically do. A lot of times coroners or medical examiners' offices or even some institutions will utilize something like this to contain the body to allow us to take them into our care, right? Almost always, when we get this back to our funeral home, we're taking the body out of that, right? I realize there are times when we don't, right? There's a situation of a death that there's nothing that we can do and the body stays in the body bag, but almost always we're taking the body out, right? What about that? Okay, temporary container. Anybody else? Plastic box. Sometimes I hear black plastic container. Right? Sometimes I hear temporary urn. Shipping container. Okay. So the reason I want to put these on the screen is because I want you to really start thinking about these two items as the same. Okay? I don't know this question, so I'm going to ask this question. In the state of Iowa, as a funeral home, can you own your own crematory? So you can have your own crematory on premise. In the state of Iowa, would you say the majority of funeral homes have their own crematory, or is it more rare? Like larger firms probably have crematories, and then smaller firms are utilizing an outside resource for that? Okay, all right. That's exactly the way it is in Indiana. It is growing, and I'm sure it's growing here as well, but that's exactly what we see as well. So I want you to think about these two items as exactly the same thing, especially if you utilize an outside crematory to perform your cremations. Okay? So, consider calling the black plastic container a transfer container. Don't call it a temporary urn. We use this transfer container to place Dad in once the cremation process is complete and safely transport him back to our funeral home. Then, once the urn that you selected arrives, one of our cremation specialists will transfer Dad into the permanent urn or keepsakes that you selected. So this is the exact same thing if you're utilizing an outside source. This is for our use to safely get Dad back from where we took him for the cremation to bring him back into our care. Okay? It's not for him to stay forever. That's not the goal. And so when we present that to a family, that's why we're asking them to select those two containers, right? Container Dad's placed in to go to the crematory for the cremation process, and an urn to put Dad in afterwards, okay? Now here's the thing. You're going to serve a family that you just served. And when Dad died, this is what they picked up. And they're going to say to you, hey, when Dad died, you just gave this Dad back in a black plastic box. It's still a big, right? I'm not telling you you can't use it, but I'm just telling you to think about it just slightly differently. Right? And again, we don't typically leave a body in this. We typically take them out, put them in a casket, put them in a cremation container. They don't normally stay here. Do you know that most cemeteries will bury this? Very few cemeteries have any regulations about what the body's placed in, except for an outer burial container if that's their rule. So you can technically take that to the cemetery and put it in a burial vault. We never talk about that, right? It's a transfer container. It's used to safely bring someone into our care. If you do have your own crematory, my suggestion is that we don't ever talk about this, right? We don't even bring up to the family what the cremains are going to be placed in because they're selecting what their family's going to use, right? If you want to put this on your wall and say, $25, $40, $100, free, it doesn't make any difference to me. Like, if you wanna give them that option, that's fine. But like, we shouldn't even be using it if we own our own crematory. The family should never know that this is what we do if nothing's selected, unless they don't select something, right? We should just show them our urn display or our urn catalog and say, select whatever you like. Only use the words cremains when discussing what is left over after the cremation process. Otherwise, try to refer to the deceased name or the title, or their title. So that's one of the things that I think that we get so comfortable in this industry. We're used to carrying around urns and black plastic transfer containers all the time, right? We know exactly what they are. Sometimes they're sitting in places that are unique in our offices and sometimes sitting by the front door. Like, we're so used to that. We know what they are. Our terminology is, those are cremated remains, or those are cremains, however you might refer to them. But to that family that's coming back to pick them up, that's their loved one. That's still dad, that's still mom, that's still daughter, that's still Joe, Jill, whoever it might be. So especially when you're speaking to the family about that, make sure that you're trying to make sure you're correlating that back to their loved one. Please don't use the word ashes. Cigarettes have ashes, grandma doesn't. Okay, so just, again, we're so used to that, we understand exactly what we're talking about, but to them, that's still their loved one. Okay, you still cared for their loved one. Always treat the cremated individual with the same level of dignity that you would an uncremated body. When I put this in here, what I meant by this was, you'd be surprised how many front doors I walk into and I open the front door and there's a table or something right inside the door and there is a black plastic transfer container or an urn sitting there. Because at some point today, the Smith family is coming to pick up mom, so we just got it sitting there waiting for them. And so that's, again, like, how do we rethink this? Like, we would if we had a family coming in for a private viewing, before a cremation, before a visitation, we would never roll the casket to the front door and say, just stop by anytime. Right? We know when that family's coming, right? So again, think about it from your perspective. If you just opened the door and mom was sitting right there, like how that looks. Folks, I did it. I did it in my time at the funeral home when cremation was 15 or 20%. Right? I'm guilty of it. We had a staircase that came down from an office right to the front door. We often sat cremated remains on the first step because we knew the family was coming by sometime today, right? But again, just thinking about it differently because it's the bulk of our business, right? What is your current process for families picking up their loved ones after cremation? Again, we just kind of hit on this a little bit, but I would suggest that you set an appointment with every family that's picking up their loved one. Know when they're coming so that you can be ready for them when they get there. Because when you say just stop by whenever, when does that family stop by? At the least convenient time. When the other family's walking in the door for arrangements. When the family's walking in the door for a first view before visitation. When you're trying to get out of there to get to the golf course at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Right? They always stop by at the least convenient time. And again, thinking about it from a burial perspective, we don't ever tell a family just to stop by for a viewing, right? We always talk about when that's going to happen. So again, just rethinking that. We're going to get into the pickup process a little bit in more detail here in the next few slides. Consider using the family arrangement agenda. I'm going to show you what that looks like. And I want to preface that it is not for us. It's not for any of us in this building or any of us that make funeral arrangements. We all know exactly how to make funeral arrangements. We do it every day, right? So I'm going to show you why I think this is important and how I think it helps drive some of the points home that we talked about today. So let's think about family pickup. So again, as I travel all over the state of Indiana, Ohio, parts of Illinois, I often see interesting ways that funeral homes have folks ready for families to pick up after cremation. I'll often walk in, there might be an arrangement table. There's literally just a black plastic transfer container sitting on the middle of the arrangement table, because at some point today, the Smith family's coming by to pick up mom, okay? And there's nothing wrong with that. It's not terrible, but just rethinking that a little bit and why we do things differently at our funeral home. So picture on the right is the exact same picture I had on the previous slide. The picture on the left is just a little bit of a different setting. Now, I realize the picture on the right is a black plastic transfer container. Picture on the left is cremation urn, right? Something that's more pleasing. But it really wouldn't matter to me if the family didn't select anything and the black plastic transfer container was sitting there. From your perspective, if you were going to the funeral home to pick up your loved one at 2 o'clock this afternoon, and you walked into the funeral home to pick up your mother or your father, which would you find more attractive to walk into and see? Right, it's obvious, the picture on the left, right? And I did this, and I wanted to show you how incredibly simple this is. This picture on the left is actually taken in my house. That is a piano bench. That is a picture of my wife's grandmother, who is deceased. She was not cremated, she is not in that urn. But grandma's picture was on our fireplace, and I grabbed it to use it for this picture. That is an empty urn that I just happened to have left over from a convention, a battery-powered candle, and a fake flower. And so, it's so incredibly easy to create this over this. And the thing is you all have beautiful facilities. Most of your funeral homes are gorgeous and well cared for, and they're beautiful. Some of them that I walk in are still 1970, but most are beautiful, just kidding. But it's so easy to create this different environment. Take the corner of a chapel, take a corner of a arrangement room, take a corner of a side room, bring a flower stand in that's pretty to put the urn on. We almost always ask for a photo for our obituary for our website, right? Whether it's a direct cremation or a traditional service, we almost always ask for a photo. Go buy 20 frames at the discount Dollar General store. Put the photo in there. Use the same frame for every picture. It doesn't make any difference how you want to set that up. If you choose to want to use a candle or a battery-powered candle or a fake flower, like just to make it look more attractive. This shows that we went the extra mile because we care about your family, right? And so again, just think about that from your perspective. If you were going to the funeral home to pick up your loved one, which do you think would make you feel better, right? A couple of other examples of some of my funeral home partners that are doing this on a regular basis, just to kind of give you a couple more ideas. Picture on the left, this is of an entryway of a funeral home. It's a real small rural funeral home, doesn't have a bunch of walk-in traffic. And when you walk in, there's a little foyer, then there's a big open room with a fireplace, and it's just like a congregating area. And he has a couple of high-top cocktail tables in there that people just stand at during visitation. And he just takes that table, puts the urn on. He does use a couple of fake artificial flowers and a battery-powered candle. He also will print 5 memorial folders for every cremation family. Doesn't matter if they do nothing. Obviously, if they're having a service, it's a little different, but especially for those families that are doing nothing, he prints 5 memorial folders. You know what that turns into most of the time? The ask for more. Okay? So again, that's just something that he does a little different twist. Picture on the right is in a side parlor room, and they got a couple of fake flowers that are specific for this type of event. So if it's a round urn, they're using the wreath. This particular gentleman was a veteran, but there were no services. He's still entitled to that American flag for serving our country. So they always fold the flag, and I put this picture in so that we could see that even though there's no service, they're still getting the flag to take home with Dad when they come in to pick them up. So again, just super simple to think about. It's a little bit different than what maybe you're doing. Is anybody in the room doing something similar to this now? Perfect.
I would like to add, we usually have a couple of chairs.
Mhm.
Because a lot of times it's kind of overwhelming for families.
Yep.
We just give them a minute to sit down.
Yep.
take their turn, and then when they're ready to go, we have them sign the paperwork.
Yep.
Put them out to the cars and.
There you go. Perfect, right? So this particular firm, I put this in because not everybody can do this, but this particular firm on the east side of Indiana has like an end of a chapel that they weren't using. It literally had become chair storage. And I worked with the owner and I said, can we use that room for something different? He's like, yeah, you can use it for whatever you want. So we tested something here, and we put a couple of these glass stands in, and we put some unique keepsakes in there. And our hope was that when a family came in, there might be something that they would see that then they might ask about. What we found actually is we've taken those out now. They're not there anymore because their directors are doing a really good job of making sure those conversations are happening before they get here. So most of the time, that's already been done, okay? But what they did here was they created this room and they titled it Peace Chapel. This is their cremation room. And so they don't meet families in there for like arrangements. They still use arrangement rooms for that. But if there is a family that's coming in to pick up their loved one after cremation, this is where they come. And if there's a family coming in to do a private viewing, a family goodbye, or an identification, they just move this, spread out the torchieres, and that's where the body is placed for that portion. And so not everybody has the room to do something like this, but I wanted to put it in there just for that. And just to hit on what you said, what happens here is the folks that are bringing them in, and I'll kind of tell you about that because it's a little different here as well. They come in, they have the family sit down here at the table, and they actually excuse themselves and say, I need to go get a couple pieces of paperwork for you to sign. Dad's right over here, and what they found is often they come back, like a few minutes later, family has taken these chairs and moved over here. And they are having a moment with their loved one, and quite often they will say, can we have a couple more minutes? Because it just gives them that chance, right? It gives them that chance to have that, because maybe they chose not to, it was their decision, but you're providing that opportunity for them. The other thing I want to share with you what this firm does, and not everybody likes this, and it's perfectly okay, but I want to share it with you because it's been super, super successful for them. Whenever a family comes back to pick up their loved one after the cremation process, the folks that bring them in this room, her name is Michelle, and she is their prenatal counselor. She does not mention one thing about making prearrangements in this setting. But what they have found is this particular firm has a very aggressive pre-need program. What they have found is this allows Michelle to develop a relationship, and then in a month when Michelle calls to follow up with them, they remember who Michelle was. And they're more likely to talk to Michelle because they created a relationship with her. So that's different. That requires a larger staff. It requires your ability to lose control over that as a funeral director and allow somebody else to do that. Now, quite often, a lot of times, one of the funeral directors here, his name's Bob. Bob will stick his head in the door and say hi when the family comes in, but that's Michelle's job to reach out to them and say, cremation is finished up, when would you like to come in and pick up Dad? And when that happens, it all happens right here, okay? And so it's just interesting, it's an interesting different take on it, right? But if you've got an active pre-need staff and you have somebody that you feel like would be capable of this portion, it has proven to be extremely successful when it comes time for Michelle to reach out to them for aftercare and then start down the pre-need path. It's been super successful. So, but it requires, you feeling comfortable with that as well. Consider using some sort of an urn carrier, an ark. So many of our new funeral coaches now have some sort of an urn carrier in the back that you can utilize. But when you think about something like this, it allows you to entertain couple of things. One is you allow the pallbearers to be a part of the service again. So maybe not 6 of them, but you have a few that can participate. Using your funeral coach, in my opinion, it's a rolling billboard, right? People notice it and your name's on the side of it, right? So whenever you can utilize that, people notice the hearse, that's how they say it, the hearse going down the road, right? They see it. And so whenever you can utilize that, and even in a memorial service held off-site that you're going to, that you're participating in, roll your funeral coach. It's a billboard, right? We do things differently here. Okay, this is the family arrangement agenda that we hit on earlier. Timing, I'm good. This, again, I want to preface that this is not for anyone sitting in this room. Everybody sitting in this room, I'm assuming, knows how to make funeral arrangements. They do it every day, you guys do it every day. You know your flow, you know your agenda, you know point A to point B, you know exactly how your arrangement process flows. But when you think back to those previous slides, most people are only involved in this 1 or 2 times in their lifetime, okay? The other thing I'll tell you is, a lot of funeral directors will tell me that they're terrible salespeople. I will actually tell you I'm a terrible salesperson, and I'm in sales. I'm really good at building relationships. And that's what we get to do with families, right? We get to build those relationships in a short time. But what this does is twofold. One is the things that we talked about today are in this. So the selection of containers is in there. It provides the family with a little bit of guidance of where we're going today, because they've never been a part of something like this before, so it helps put them at ease. And it even does little things like service time and visitation time is on here, because we assume everybody wants something, right? So maybe this will spark the question of, oh, I didn't realize we could have a service when Dad was being cremated, right? So it's there, doesn't mean you always use it. But again, this can be changed and fluctuated however you do your arrangement conference, okay? So if you start with discussing service details and then go into biographical information, you can just change your bullet points, right? So this is just a generic one that I have set up. This is actually the way that I would have typically made arrangements. I always just started out with having a conversation with the family, trying to get to know them if I didn't know them. And then I moved into biographical information for the obituary and death certificate. Then I talked about the services that the families wanted to have, and then I went to the merchandise selections and then the rest of the details. The other thing that this does, in my opinion, is, I don't know if there's anybody in the room that feels the same way with this, but I disliked getting to the point of my arrangement conference where I had to ask my families for money. I believe we all truly get into this business because we serve from here. We want to care for families. That's why we're in this business. And so I never like to get to that point where we should have just said, how do you plan on taking care of this today? I wasn't good at it. So this helps drive that home that the family sees that we're going to talk about that today. Okay? Again, this can be changed, adjusted, however you feel. You can actually create this to be a burial agenda as well. One of the things that I found to be nice about this is sometimes when you sit down with a family and you got dad passed away, you got a spouse, a couple of kids, and maybe a couple of grandkids that came in to make arrangements. I can remember several times where I would start down the path that I was planning to go down, and maybe the grandson sitting over in the corner would interrupt me and say, "Hey Nathan, what time's the pallbearers need to be here?" Right? And we all know where we get to that in our arrangement conference, right? But Grandma asked him to be in charge of that, and so that's what was important to him during the arrangement conference. So sometimes this helps just to keep your arrangement conference in flow. When a family maybe sees if that's something that's important, that we're going to talk about that at a certain point, it might help just to keep that arrangement conference in flow. These can be customized. This particular one is customized so that when the Wilson family comes in, they see that you took the time to have this ready for them specifically. I have some firms that just leave these in the arrangement room and they have taken that off and it just says family arrangement agenda. And so if you can do it either way. There's contact information that's kind of cut off here, but this on the left-hand side is the name of the funeral home and the date that the family's coming in. On the right-hand side is the funeral director that's taking care of them, contact. What this also sometimes provides is families are super nervous to be there, and some people just need a place to doodle on a piece of paper or draw pictures because that's what makes them feel comfortable. I just recommend that you print these on regular paper, and if you use an arrangement table, lay them at each seat. If you know only 2 people are coming in to make arrangements, just print 2 of them. But I think what this does is it just helps drive home some of the things we talked about. So today we're going to have merchandise selections. We've kind of got them listed there. We're also going to talk about how we're going to pay for things. We're going to talk about the services that you would like. It's all right there. So it just kind of helps to drive that home. If there's anything in my presentation today that you feel you would like, so if there are people sitting in the room that want this agenda, I will send it to you. Or I will get it to Ryan. They can send it to you, right? It's all editable. It's done in a PowerPoint. Like you can just adjust the text, change whatever you want. I do have a couple of firms, just to kind of tell you this, that utilize, if you search like on Google or whatever, menu boards, they're just like little leather pads that have like triangle things that you can tuck a piece of paper in. Just makes it look a little nicer sitting on the table. I also have firms that literally just print these and lay them on the table. So I just share that with you just as a couple of thoughts there. But it just kind of creates a different perspective. But also if you have things that you need that family to do, like bring photos back into you, bring clothing back into you, bring an insurance policy back into you, there's a place that they can write notes at the bottom. So they have those tasks right in front of them. And it just, again, just kind of helps streamline that. Not that you're trying to get them out quicker, that's not the point. It just helps them put them at ease because they're not used to doing this like we are every day. Okay? So if you have interest in this, please let me know. Give me an email address after I'm finished. I'm happy to send it to you. Okay, so now I'm going to provide you with what I feel like is an easy button to kind of help put all this together. So Matthews Aurora has really taken a different direction in regards to how we support our funeral home partners. We are not just a casket provider anymore. We have a tremendous amount of solutions and different products that help funeral homes really remain relevant. And not every solution works for every funeral home. But I think this solution, in my opinion, is one of the very best that we have in our toolbox at Matthews Aurora. So this again is a program that is designed to put together a 11 by 17 printed, folded 8.5 by 11 brochure that is customized to your funeral home. So Dale or Ryan would help you get this going to implement it into your funeral homes. We print them for you at no charge. We customize them for you at no charge. And we continue to print them for you as you continue to use it and you need more. But what this does is it just creates kind of the most commonly selected services and the most commonly selected merchandise, and then puts kind of everything together, because when we talk cremation, the possibilities are endless. Like, you can shoot people into Mars cremated. You can make people into diamonds. You can, the possibilities are endless, but most of the time, families kind of stay in the same lane with your guidance, right? So this just kind of helps put it all together. You actually utilize this to meet the family. So you still have to use your general price list. This isn't a way to not use your GPL. FTC still requires us to use GPLs. But this is an add-on to your GPL that when that family that's choosing cremation, this is what you utilize to show them what their different choices are. Now we can vary from this, right? Because again, cremation can go multiple different ways, but we tailor this to be the most commonly selected services for your funeral home as well as what goes with it, okay? So, again, I consider it the easy button, understanding why it works and why it performs so well. Our Remember You guide is tailored and personalized for your funeral home. The guide provides arrangements with an informative and simple approach to presenting the choices that your families have when selecting cremation. It's suitable for both at-need and pre-need arrangements, so you can use it with a family that's experienced the death or even those that are coming in to make their arrangements ahead of time. The ROI guide describes the value of different memorial choices from full-service cremation with visitation and funeral to memorial services to private family viewings, or can be tailored to anything that you would like to add into there. So if you have a facility, that you have a celebration center, that you have a caterer come in, it can be tailored to show those types of services. It's a simple approach to helping families select merchandise, cremation caskets, cremation containers, urns, jewelry, and other keepsakes. It is proven for firms that are using this on a regular basis with every cremation family that you serve, it will increase your service and merchandise by 25%. I will almost guarantee it. Because it makes sure families are seeing every choice every time. It really does. Provides a consistent presentation for firms with multiple funeral directors, making sure families see every choice every time. Believe it or not, firms that have larger staffs, multiple funeral directors, most of the time there are funeral directors within that staff that are really good meeting cremation families, and there are some staff members that take the easy route out every time. I have a firm that I take care of on the other side of the other side of Cleveland, Ohio, and they are a large firm, and they have multiple directors, and the owner of that business has recognized who's good at meeting cremation families and who's not. And when he does his daily schedule, if it's a family coming in for cremation, you can bet Jason's meeting them. Because he's the best at it within their staff, especially if it's not a pre-needed contract. So he's recognized that, but what this does help with is making sure that if it's used properly, you're walking through each of those choices each time. Even if a family tells you they only want direct cremation, you can still walk them through to make sure they understand that they can do something different if they would choose, okay? Uses a good, better, best approach, but it focuses on service first. What we recognize is, obviously we're a product-driven business, right? We want you to use our products. But what we found is actually the profitability that most firms see comes from serving that family and adding services to that contract rather than the merchandise that comes secondary. We think you should be making sure that the family selects those items, but actually is service focused first, okay? There's benefits to that not only from a profitability standpoint, but when families continue to come into your funeral home and you do things differently, then that speaks for you as well. So here's what the guide kind of looks like, okay? So the first couple of pages, obviously there's a cover page. It can be customized with a picture of your funeral home, picture of your staff. If there's something in your town that is like specific that you want to put on the cover, we will customize these however you want. The first couple of pages are what I would kind of consider fluff pages. So they talk about the importance of sharing a story, saying goodbye, what the different cremation choices are, and then also choosing that final resting place. So thinking about what we're going to do with mom after the cremation process is over. Then we get into pages that are service focused. And again, this is just an example, but page 1 is typically like your traditional cremation with the body present, viewing service, however you would want to do that. This particular guide is what we call the community gathering, which is that traditional service. You do not have to use our terminology. If you call your traditional service a traditional cremation, that's what we'll put on here. Then a single day service with visitation. The friends and family goodbye is a memorial service, cremation, or a celebration of life. Private and formal goodbye. That is when just the family's coming in for some private time prior to the cremation. If your choice is to put direct cremation in here, we will do that as well. If that's what you want to have in your guide, we're perfectly okay with that. Sometimes I will actually put the direct cremation on the back page the last page with some additional service choices, and maybe list the direct cremation there, but that would be totally up to what you design and what you would like to have in your guide. This particular guide, just to point out, sometimes I'll have firms that'll tell me I'm terrible at selling urns. Just don't like it. I really don't even care if a family brings an Amazon urn in. Well, to me, you're losing anywhere between $150 to $300 or $400 of profit when you have that mindset, right? Again, we don't do that on the cremation or on the burial side. We're not okay with that on the burial side. This particular guide, the reason I use it in my presentation is I just want you to see that in these choices, there's an allowance for a permanent urn in there. So if you are a firm that's like, I'm just really not good at presenting urns or asking the family to pick one, this includes it, and that kind of sometimes helps get you to that point where you have a better take rate from the families because it's included in the services that you're providing, okay? What I've found is that most of the time once the funeral home gets used to using this guide, that will actually come out of there. Because what I found is if you give this family a choice, and like tier 3 urn here is a $350 retail urn, that family will never spend more than that because you gave it to them, right? So you included it. And so what I found is that once funeral homes get more comfortable with having that conversation of 2 container selections today, and they're just allowing that family to select an urn, their sales grow and they get better. I'm still seeing on average about a $350 retail urn purchased across my customer base. But what I will tell you is I'm seeing more and more expensive urns purchased. So it's kind of like the burial side, right? We're not seeing very many coppers and bronzes going out the door anymore. It's kind of the same thing on the cremation merchandise side as well. But I am seeing a few more unique urns that might be a little bit higher priced, but they really drive a memory for that family when they look at your display or they look at your catalog to be able to see that. So again, these are the service pages. They can be customized however you want them. The photos can be changed if you would like something different. Our marketing team will put that together for you. Everything on here is customizable, so the wording can be changed to match your GPL, all that stuff, and the guys in the back will be able to help you get those started. Then we move to the first container selection. And the way I typically set my guides up for my customers is the page on the left. This is a page that opens up. And so the page on the left, the family can most often select a casket or container from the left-hand side if they were doing more of a traditional cremation. Okay, so if the body was present, typically they're selecting from the left-hand side. Okay, if it's a memorial service down to a direct, they can select from any of those, right? But what we're finding is most families that are choosing to do less service are choosing the lower expensive merchandise, right? That's just typical. So, we'll direct cremate any of these any day of the week, right? All of our wood caskets now have crematable beds in them, so our entire wood line is our cremation caskets can be used for that. And so I will tell you that I'm seeing more and more American barnwoods cremated every day. That's a casket that appeals to certain people, and it doesn't matter whether we're taking it to the cemetery or the crematory, right? If it is a memorial service down to a direct, most of the time those families are selecting from the right-hand side. I like to have just a good, better, best selection here. Instead of having more than these choices, I like just to simplify it. That's Nathan's personal opinion. Here's what I'll tell you, is I would say that still the largest percentage of your cremation families will probably select that. But once we actually start giving the family a choice and we show them what they're going to get, I see more and more of these go out the door every day. This is cardboard, right? It's just prettier cardboard. But can anybody give me what their thoughts are as to why you think when utilizing this guide, you see this selection more than you do? Yes?
Middle of the road.
Middle of the road, yep. It falls back to that, people want to be average, right?
Has a pillow. Yeah, has a pillow.
100%. When you explain to a family or you show them that mom's gonna be in a box with nothing, but then they see a pillow, more and more families are apt to go to this next step because of that, and you don't even have to say anything. Right? But again, we're just giving them that choice. We're allowing them to select. Yes?
I can't read your number different. What's the difference on your price?
So this guy, the bottom is $250 and the middle's $550, top's $850. But those could obviously be set however you wanted them to be. And I literally see this container all over the board. I see it free, I see it $75, I see it $105, I see it $250, I see it $350, I see it all over the board. And again, it doesn't make any difference to me what you charge for them.
Put a weight limit on
Weight limit on them?
them, yeah.
So our cloth covers are tested for 1,000 pounds. I don't know that we test our cardboard boxes. I think that's one of those things where we as funeral directors, when we have that situation, even in a burial, we tackle that specific situation, right? And so when we have a body that won't go into a standard 24-inch casket, we talk to that family about how they need to select something that works, right? And so for the most part, these are always going to work, but you may have to have that conversation that because of dad's size, we may need to use a shipping container or whatever you might use in that situation, right? We tackle those different things as we need to have those conversations, okay? But again, what I found is if you implement this, every direct cremation family is not going to pick this. It's not going to happen. But if we have 10 families that move up, like we're better, right? We're better than we were when we started. Then we move into urn pages. What we have found, especially since cremation families tend to think they're choosing this because they think it's easier, we've actually tier priced most of our urns. So we have an MSRP priced catalog, full cremation catalog. And what you'll find is a lot of times you'll see multiple urns at the same retail price point. They might be $5 to $10 difference in wholesale cost, but what we found is that families that choose cremation like the idea that they have multiple selections in the same price point. And so we've set these guides up to have the same price on the urns on each page. So the retail price of each of these pages are all the same. So this particular guide is set up $550, $450, $350. We can set it up however you want. If you feel that your market needs a $250 urn or a $195 urn to start out, we can set those up however you would like. You can obviously also branch off of this and show them the full cremation catalog if there's not something here that they like, just like when we walk into the selection room and there's not a casket in there they like. Okay? There's keepsake urns shown with the full-size urns, just again to start that conversation to make sure families know that if they choose to want to keep a small portion of the cremated remains of their loved one, they can choose to do that and you can have that conversation. And then we roll into a keepsake page, and then into a memorial jewelry. Yes?
A question on the catalog.
Yep.
In your experience, do you think the presenting the urns is better with 3 or 4 pages, or better to have a display that is just like that has your categories?
If you can do both, so you utilize this when you physically sit down with the family, and you have a display that they can see or you can take them into, that's great. But if your space doesn't allow you to have a nice urn display, this, I think, can take the place of that. But if you can have physical displays, I always think that's better. Yeah. Where I think that this is super helpful too is if you do have a staff that you have, like a pre-need staff, a lot of times those folks are not meeting people in the funeral home, and so this gives them the opportunity to be able to take that with them. So, but no, it's a great question. If you can mimic this display on a actual physical display, which we actually have what we call an IRY display that literally walks through on slat wall exactly what this brochure walks through with. And so you can have both of those that work well together. So again, another page of unique keepsakes. This just sparks conversation. And then Our line of personal expressions, which is our fingerprint jewelry, that we have, I would tell you, if you are not offering this to families, you are missing out. People will beat you up one side and down the other about your direct cremation fee, and then they will spend $1,500 right there. So if you aren't offering it, they'll get it from someplace else. I think our line is the absolute best because not only does ours allow you to put a fingerprint on it, but you can put photos, you can put handwriting, so there's different options on there. All of our pendants come, you can order them with or without a chamber. So if the family does want to keep a small portion of the cremated remains in there, they can, or they can just order it as a keepsake. We are obviously not the only company that's providing a product like this, but if you are not offering this type of product, you are missing an opportunity to capture more profitability. I'll share this just a real quick story. I have a firm up in Decatur, Indiana. I've been friends with them for a super long time, and actually was friends with them prior to being in my role. And Ryan and Eric are the two owners, and they despise selling keepsakes. If they were standing here with me, they would tell you they hate it. They just don't like it. And I finally convinced them to put in a personal expressions display. I'm like, you guys you're missing out. So we put it in, and Ryan said, I'm not going to talk about it, Nathan. I don't like it. I'm like, okay, that's fine. Just let it sit there. And so Ryan calls me, and again, I've known him for a really, really long time. I answer the phone, and I'm like, hey, what's up? He's like, and I'll blurt this out, I effing hate you. I said, well, thanks, Ryan. He's like, no, man, I love you, and I hate you. I'm like, well, what's going on? He's like, I literally just finished making arrangements for a burial family that we are having a graveside service only, and they complained and complained to me about the cost of a Bradford 20-gauge non-gasket. So I discounted the Bradford to them, and we're literally just having a graveside service. I left the room to go get the contract ready for them to sign. I come back in the room, they're all standing around your display. They ask me what it is, and I tell them, and they say, we think we might want some of that. And I was like, okay, let me see if I can find the price list that Nathan left me, because I don't remember where I put it. They come back in for a private viewing before they go to the cemetery in 2 days. They bring in an order that's $3,800. And he goes, I just made more off that stupid jewelry you told me to put in than I made off the casket sale. I'm like, you just have to have it there. People see value in this because they can take it home with them. And so this is a way to really drive even those families that choose to do nothing with you. They're going to do their service on their own. They don't need you. Make sure they're seeing this, because there are times when this can turn into another direct cremation that not necessarily a cremation, but the dollar amount can come from this, just like another direct cremation. So make sure, and that's where this guide I think is so helpful. It's not every piece, right? But it just allows you to have that conversation to make sure families that are aware that they can do it. Okay? Our full cremation catalog, this is a picture of it. We have 2 different versions. We have a non-price version, and then we have an MSRP price version so that you can literally hand it to a family. Our suggested retails are in there that a family can literally look through it and see exactly what they would pay for that product, so that you're not having to fish through a price list to try to tell them. Our MSRPs are roughly about a 2 to 2.2 times markup off a wholesale list. It's pretty common in the industry where that's at. Like I said, we typically do try to price point things together so it's easier for families to understand. We also have another tool that we recently launched last year called Cherished Memories. This is the opportunity for you to have an e-commerce site that you can sell cremation products on your website, and it is your website. So when they go to your website, it will have your funeral home name right here in this top area, and you can sell personal expressions jewelry or anything in our cremation catalog, and you get complete credit for it. So if you do have that family that you feel like is going to go somewhere else to buy their urn, you can provide them with your store. This was actually started to help get incremental sales from family members that were not a part of the arrangement conference. So like those grandkids and nieces and nephews, there's just a QR code that you can have standing in your funeral home. The families can scan and go directly to your site. It can be tagged to your funeral home website, so you can drive traffic to your funeral home website as well. But it helps just to complement what the IRY guide helps with as well. How am I on time? I'm right at it. Okay, I'll blow through this. Who's worried about costing more? Roger Schager wrote a book from Federated. It's a fantastic, easy read. If you have not read it, I would highly recommend that you read it. But he states in there that according to a recent NFDA consumer awareness and preferences study, while about 2/3 of funeral directors thought families primarily worried about the price of a funeral, only about 1/10 of the families reported that they did. And so price is actually more important to us than it is to the families that we're serving. Yes, there is a portion of our population that is completely price driven, but it's not everybody. Don't make assumptions. So if I say to you, my wife and I are going out for a nice dinner for our anniversary is actually this weekend. Unfortunately, we didn't go to dinner because we were at the tennis courts watching my daughter. But if I said to you, my wife and I are going to dinner for our anniversary, some of us may feel that this is a really nice dinner, right? Texas Roadhouse actually has great steaks, right? But some of us may feel that this is where we would go. Both of these places do the exact same thing and they do it differently, right? I may think Ruth Chris is the place that I want to go. Someone else may think Texas Roadhouse. But my point is don't assume that what we think is nice is what everybody thinks is nice. If I say to you, what's your favorite, coffee or chocolate? If I ask you that direct question, most of the time you're not going to come back to me and say, Nathan, I'd actually prefer cupcake. You're going to say coffee or chocolate, because that's what I asked you, right? Same thing with, would you rather go on a vacation to Las Vegas or a beach? If I asked you that direct question, you're probably not going to say, well, I actually prefer cruise. If we ask the direct questions, then that's where we get the feedback from. And so we choose from the options that we're presented with. And so if we're utilizing a guide like the IRY guide, we're presenting them with the options that most families choose at our funeral home. So are you communicating every option to every family every time? Other quick things to consider. Offer an online direct cremation arrangement option. I'm seeing this pop up more and more and more. May not be for you, I'm just throwing it out there. Allow families that are choosing to do nothing to actually make their arrangements online. There's all kinds of software companies out there that are doing this. Make sure you're explaining the state laws to every family so they know what they can do. Does your community know you and your firm? Do they know you? What do they see when they go to your website? What does your website say about you? Rethink your merchandise selection room. If 64% of our families are choosing cremation, should we have 20 full-size caskets and a 4-foot slat wall of urns? So just rethink that a little bit. How are our families perceiving what they see when they walk in? It's a great tool. Walk in your selection room and just be like, if I was a cremation family, would I feel like I'm being served well here? Right? Because 64% of your families are choosing it. Brainstorm and come up with some unique service options. What do we do differently at our funeral home that somebody else doesn't do that can set us apart? Come up with a place to have an outdoor celebration of life that you can push a family to, talk about with. Have a place that you can have a catered meal. Like, think about just different ways that you can serve them. Train your staff. There's a great tool that Ryan and Dale have access to that's done by our professional development tool, gals, that's called the Art of Cremation Phone Inquiries. Number one phone call we get is, what's your charge for direct cremation? This walks through what families are experiencing when they call your firm. If we are taking that phone call and they say, what's your charge for direct cremation? And we quote whatever our price is, $15.95, $19.95, whatever it is. And then they hang up the phone with you and they call the next funeral home and they're $100 less, you just lost the call. If that's truly what we're making it about, price, then if you're not the least expensive, you're most likely not gonna get the call. But if you engage with that family and have them ask them the right questions, even sometimes if you're more expensive, they will feel more comfortable with you and they will still call you because you took the time to help them. I'm guessing almost all of you in this room are engaging with families when they call you and ask those questions. Consider creating a DIY kit to help families when they choose this path. So when a family tells you they don't want you to be a part of the service, is that an option in Iowa? So they can have a memorial service without you present? Can the cremated remains be present for that? They can, okay. That's one thing that Indiana has helped us with. So families can do their own service, but if there is a body present, that includes cremated remains, because that is still considered a body in the state of Indiana. If there are cremated remains present, we have to be there. So they can have a service, they just can't have their loved one there with them without a funeral director. You guys don't have that? Since we do have that to fight, think of a way that we can help that family even if we aren't there. Okay, so maybe that's coming up with a package with a registered book, memorial folders, flower stands that you would allow them to use. Like, just think outside the box so that we can still be a part of it, even when they're trying to exclude us. Okay, that's just a thought. And that's it. If anybody has any questions, or if you would like any of the questions that I had on the slide, if you didn't